Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, as always, joined by my co-host, Julio Vela. What's going on, man?
Great.
We got a full house tonight.
Huge house.
We go from one guest last week to three this week. You can see them all there out there on the screen. Jen Gott, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Jamal Haynes, what's going on?
Nothing much, just living life.
And of course, the one, the only Dane Johnson.
Howdy, howdy.
Glad to have you back, man.
Welcome. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
We're always welcome to be in the presence of Dane Johnson, right? So that's
And your hair. We're always welcome to be in the presence of your ever-growing mane.
It's growing. It's growing.
You know, I wasn't going to say anything.
I've
been saying it. I've been saying something every week since
I figure it's going to take like 6 months.
6 months?
I think so.
Really?
Maybe 4.
That long?
I hope 4.
What is your
What do you
wife?
have, a
What
movie
is your
portrait
wife?
trying out for?
You know, I don't know.
What are you doing?
Just changing it up, man.
What does your wife say about this?
She objects.
Yeah, my wife's pregnant again, by the way. Ooh, I should have said that on TV, didn't I?
Yeah, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Are you trying a new look in hopes that it won't result in another child?
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Well, it's supposedly it's another boy, so
Well, good.
I'm thinking that we're doing the Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
Congrats.
Louie and the last boy.
Congrats, man. That's big news.
Yeah.
We got a great show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We will be, of course, taking your questions and comments on air. We got Twitter up at HTC_TV. We'll also be taking your phone calls starting around 8:30. 713-807-1794 is the number, so call in with your questions for our panel. Guys, I want to start with kind of a new news topic that came to light today. I, in fact, talked with Channel 2 about it earlier today. Of course, our local NBC affiliate, KPRC. And the story goes something like this. The 911 call center here in Houston has apparently tried to upgrade their computer system and how they were storing calls, because of course we know everything's digital now, and about 136,000 phone calls that they know of right now were not recorded or are in some state of garbleness that you can't even tell what it is. And they're currently going back through and think the problem may go back to as far as April, when they started upgrading the system. And of course, the city, Channel 2 interviews the city, somebody from the city, and they say, no big deal. I think it's a huge deal, guys. I mean, this is potential evidence in a case.
Lost evidence.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as you and I were talking before the show, Jen, I mean, this is evidence that, and for us, obviously, the absence of it is great news.
Sometimes. But as we talked about, that
In a lot of
sometimes, though,
cases.
you know, I actually used a 911 call to help me get a dismissal. So, you know, but especially for civil lawsuits
Right.
and, you know, personal injury cases and things like that, it's a big deal.
The reality is, I mean, if you've got evidence, we need the evidence.
Yeah.
So we can evaluate it. That's what we do as lawyers. We look at all the evidence, we evaluate the evidence, and we figure out what's going on. If they're claiming they're missing evidence or they're losing evidence, it's not a big deal. That doesn't fly in my book. I mean, I don't think it flies in any of our books. I would hope they would come up with a different response that, hey, we're sorry, we're trying to fetch this data, we hope to get it back.
I can promise you that's not what they said. They went on air at 5 o'clock and said, no big deal, really.
So is it deleted? Is that what they think?
No, what happened, they were upgrading the system. And so I guess in the whole transition of it, either some of them didn't record altogether
Or didn't convert?
or didn't convert and they're just garbled.
You know, it reminds me of a lot of things we deal with the government, and I hate to pick on the government, but it is what it is. They seem to be behind the times on everything that we do, whether it's the way that they test forensic evidence, whether it's scientifically valid or not, whether it's 911 tapes. There's tapes that we were just talking before also. Precinct 4 has lost hundreds, if not thousands, of DWI arrest tapes. Why is the government so far behind on that? Why can they not seem to upgrade a system without losing tapes?
Well,
I don't understand it.
I joked for the longest time that, you know, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal government, the DOJ and everybody, they were still using like WordPerfect 5.1 up until a few years ago. I mean, like they were using one of the most outdated word processing.
Well, how about
Coral.
How about the recent headline that we saw that the nuclear weapons for the United States are on floppy disks,
Exactly.
the old 5.5 inch or whatever inches they were, that have been obsolete for the last 25 years. I mean,
Makes me feel safe.
pretty scary, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember you used to have the plastic case with the 3 1/4 or whatever, and you'd organize all your games and everything.
Oh, these are before them.
I know
These
the
are,
big,
these are
the big 5.5.
Yeah, these are the big ones.
Yeah, where you used to lock the disk drive.
But you know, we
Come on.
joke about it, and sometimes it's funny. But the reality is that many times a person's liberty is at stake. You know, based on that evidence. You know, someone got arrested many times because of that 911 call. So, you know, to that person, it's a really big deal.
Particularly, I see it, you know, we use the 911s, for example, let's say in assault cases or assault family member cases where we can really use those statements that were made on the 911 to then impeach an individual who's on the stand, a witness who's on the stand. Just recently I had a case where we had on the 911, oh, he did X, Y, and Z to me. And then on the stand, he did X, Y, Z, and A, B, C, D, E. You know, and you're saying there, well, why is your 911 tape different than how you're testifying now? And, you know, are you lying then or are you lying now? And I think it goes to the heart of some types in the appropriate case, a criminal case, for example. I don't know, and for example, DWIs, you have the concerned citizen calling in, you know, saying, oh, I see this guy swerving all over the place. And that's how they wheel your guy.
Right.
And then let's be fair. I mean, in the reality, we're criminal defense lawyers. I mean, many times we don't like that evidence. It sounds real bad when there's a 911 caller saying he's all over the road, he's about to kill somebody, you got to get somebody out here quick before he kills somebody. So there are times when we don't want it, but at the end of the day, we want all of the evidence. We want to make that call. We want to be able to be the ones that actually make that call, not hide behind it or let them get away with not producing it.
Exactly. I think it's really like I said, it's a big deal. For the city to come out and say it's not a big deal, it may not be a big deal from their standpoint of response time, and maybe they're thinking about it that way, that what didn't affect response time from police or emergency system or anything like that, but I think it has a huge effect on the system.
But it also goes, I mean, I think actually even to your point about Precinct 4, to me that's an even bigger deal when you're missing videos,
Yeah.
you know, like because the video is generally of the arrest, you know, whatever's going on. Like that's an even bigger deal to me.
I wonder if they're all the VHS videos that they're missing.
You know,
Speaking of not keeping up with current technology.
I love it when you walk into the Middle Earth, as I call it, on the second floor, and you're there and you have your DVD plus R, and you have your DVD minus R, and you have stacks of all of them, and then they say, oh, that's a VHS.
Yeah.
Like,
Why? Why? Who plays?
I don't even
VHS?
have a VHS player anymore.
I have one of those from college that my kids use. It's a VHS DVD
Converter.
dual. Yeah, like no dual like TV. It's great.
Do they still have, because I haven't been to the second floor in a while, do they still have the TVs on the metal stands
No,
like you used
it's
to roll
all
in
changed
class?
up, man.
But you can still only go between the hours of like,
And not on Wednesdays.
not during lunch
Yeah.
between 9 and 3, you know, unless it's raining,
Only 5 at a time.
right?
But we've been seeing recently, at least I have, the district attorney's office trying more and more cases, for example, assault family members, without the complainant, and they just simply fall back to the 911.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm wondering now, well, what's that, you know, if you got no complainant and you have no 911, I guess they're just going to have to maybe just go on the pictures or...
It's called a nollie.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you wouldn't even be able to prove the pictures at that point. Well, I guess you could if the person who took the pictures.
Right.
Potentially, if it was the police who took the pictures.
I think with the videos, though, getting back to what Jen was saying, I think it is a bigger deal because you do have actually a defendant oftentimes on these, the interaction that they have, and potentially exculpatory. And we don't have an opportunity to see if it's exculpatory. It may be terrible for us, but we need that opportunity. It may be absolutely contradictory to what's in the offense report.
Which
and we've
is
seen that on many occasions.
We've seen that many
Every
times.
DWI case that I read the offense report, my guy is falling down drunk. And then I watch the video, and it's not the same thing. It's like, wow, where'd this guy come from? Wow, why'd you arrest this guy? And so those videos that are missing are even more suspect in those situations because you don't really know what happened. You're relying on somebody to tell you what happened, but the video evidence is the best evidence we have.
Of course.
Especially with Precinct 4, where there is a huge problem with them not telling the story exactly how it happened, or them leaving out major parts or major details of what happened. Specifically, your client saying, no, I didn't do this. I got this car from my buddy. I don't know anything about the drugs in the car. Those things are important when it comes down to making decisions about whether to take a case to trial or whether to take a deal.
Absolutely.
Or the weaving and the swerving and the failing to maintain a single lane. And those are all things that without the video, you're just left with an officer's word. And, you know, people tend to believe what the officer says unless we can pick it apart. And going back to what Dane said, I think it's we should be able to make, we should be the ones to make that call strategically how we're going to approach the case. And I think that's what having a fair system is all about.
Well, I think as defense attorneys, even though we know that many times the video may be bad for us, but we also know how important it is. That's why there's been such a big push for the body cams, you know, on police officers, those type of things. I mean, if they get your guy dead to rights, they get your guy dead to rights. But more often than not, I think there's other things that will be seen that will be helpful to us. And
Well, and you go back to, I mean, it's, you know, maybe they get it right 99% of the time, but if you've got one of those individuals that, and we all have them, that shout from the ceiling, I didn't do it. That's BS. I just didn't run the red light, or I just didn't do that, or they didn't read me my rights, or they didn't do these things. Show us the evidence.
Right.
Give it to us.
Exactly.
That's their responsibility to give to us. We don't control that scene. We don't have access to that information other than what they do. And so without that, we're at a serious disadvantage.
And I think many times on the consent to search, you know, where our client will say, no, I didn't give him, he didn't even ask me if he could search. He just like went into my car. And then a lot of times when you get the video, that's exactly what happened, you know?
Especially when you have a questionable officer. I mean, most often than not, your officer's going to be fine. There's not going to be any history. There's no
Right.
dirt at all. Nothing. He's a good cop. But you have those situations where you have a bad officer or has an officer who has a history of lying or engaging in conduct that's unbecoming of what a public servant should be, making arrests, and then now you don't even have a video to impeach him or to go after what's written in the police report.
Right. I can remember a specific case I had where there was an officer, it was Precinct 4. They pulled this car over for an equipment violation. And officers there for roughly 10 to 15 minutes. You know, they pull my client out of the car. They sit him on the ground behind the car. Another officer pulls up, and he goes and looks in the car and is like, hey, do you smell marijuana? The other cop says, no, I didn't smell marijuana at all. No marijuana is found in the vehicle. Now, without that video, that story plays out a lot differently. The officer can't ever be questioned.
Well, and like you say, we know a few of the officers have some sketchy past. We know some of those guys. The scarier ones to me are the ones that don't have the sketchy past that we find out about. And I think one of the topics tonight is
Well, and that's what I was just gonna, you know, speaking of sketchy cops, you know, we've got HPD officer Quesada. Is that how you say his name? Quesada.
It's Quesada.
Okay.
Yeah. Quesada.
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 Okay.
Yeah, but-
I trust you.
you know,
defer- I
this is what
defer to
I'm
you.
here for, right? This is what I'm here for.
That's right. So of course, this officer, who Dane, I think you know him very
very well.
very
Had
personally.
many dealings with him.
He was sentenced this week to 4 years in federal prison, and it was a pretty interesting, convoluted way that he got to federal prison, because he's sitting out there. I guess he's in his HPD car. His wife is running some illegal gaming room.
Is that Quesada? Or was
That's
that,
a different
that's
one.
A different
That's a different one.
Which one was Quesada?
Quesada was the one with the armed
Robbery.
Point break style.
I read the wrong one then.
armored truck.
I thought
Running the police radio station.
he wasn't
police
the
radio.
one that was doing the drug,
He
like,
was the lookout for
Yep.
his wife.
Oh no, the bank robberies.
No, he was bank.
Oh.
No,
No,
that
armored
was
car
armored
robberies.
car robberies.
Wait a second.
Where there's an armored car flying down the
That's-
road with money
okay.
flying out the back. He was on the radio monitoring the police radio for him. I think that was Quesada.
That was
who was the HPD officer that was the lookout for the drug?
game-
The cocaine smugglers. Remember that?
I think that might still be pending.
The problem that we're having is there's too
I
many of
can't
these things
keep
to
up
deal
with
with.
it.
I know.
We can't keep
Now
up
you've
with
got
them.
me.
I can't
Too many
keep up.
officers going to federal prison, and we
I
can't keep up.
can't keep up with all the HPD officers with pending federal cases.
No. I'm right. Quesada pleaded guilty in January to monitoring police radios for the crew that pulled off a $4 million robbery.
Yeah, but it was an armored car robbery.
Yeah.
It was not a game. You said game?
I thought it was a game room he was looking out for. It's not?
That was
Actually,
last week.
Yeah, that was.
Remember, and they got
I've
him.
got them crossed then. Okay.
We understand. There's a lot of confusion.
Well, there's too many of them getting arrested.
Yeah, and they're all robbing somebody of
Bad.
their money.
I got the name. You know, I've been in trial for 3 weeks, so I got the names mixed up.
Well, you know, I mean, my people have no, but apparently he's sitting there and he's calling in when's the most appropriate time to take down, or giving tip-offs. When's the most appropriate time to rob particular armored cars in the area?
So do you think, I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my head around. Like, at what point do you decide, like, hey, I think I'm help these people commit this, you know, armed robbery or armored car robbery? I mean, sometimes I wonder how many people actually got into the police force to do these things.
I think that in fairness, I mean, we're all lawyers and we're all pretty competent at what we do, but we know plenty of people in our profession that are not the most scrupulous. I mean, I think it transcends every
but armored
profession.
car robbery?
It's a little.
Well, but I mean, look at this one. I mean, the other one, I clearly got the names mixed up. But the one who was doing lookout for his wife's business, and he was monitoring.
Oh, he was running the plates out.
He was running the
Yeah,
plates
yeah.
As people were pulling up to make sure they weren't vice officers coming in to raid her game room. You know, so I just got the names mixed up. But yeah, you know, so here's two big deals where officers are using their ability to monitor and using the computer systems to benefit criminal activity. I mean, I don't know, Jen. I mean, you say how many of them get in with the purpose of doing that. I'm not sure that they necessarily do it with the purpose.
Well, I don't think all of them, but some of them when I look at, and it seems like in the past couple of years, there's been several more arrests of HPD officers. And a lot of times when I look, it's not officers that have been with the force, you know, 10, 15, 20 years. A lot of them, they've been there like a year and a half, 2 years. Kind of, it's like, so you're barely out of, you know, the police academy. Just seems very odd to me how you kind of accidentally fall in. I'm not saying that most of them, or sometimes I wonder that when I'm reading the stories because I see that they haven't been with HPD very long.
Well, but I mean, you hear the stories of like prison guards who help assist in getting drugs into facilities, and they're taking money on the side and doing everything. I mean, isn't it more of just you've got the ability to use your power to kind of line your pockets, so to speak? I mean, how is it any different from a politician who does the same thing? You know, it's really not. You're abusing your power.
It's the lure of fast money.
Right.
Because, I mean, they have salaries, they have benefits, they can work extra jobs and make money.
Exactly.
So it doesn't make sense why you take a job to protect the public, and at the same time, you're using that authority to kind of rip people off.
Yeah.
Well, I think they actually hit it might have been more than one armored car. I think it was like 4 million in total, and then they ended up catching the guys because they're buying, I think one of them bought a fancy car, and they're buying these mink coats, and I think that's how the whole thing kind of came back to. How they pinpointed Officer Quesada that he was calling in saying, hey, okay, you know, this armored car is ripe. Here you go. And I think the guard was pregnant or something. Driver of the armored car. Driver of the armored car was pregnant, and he said, hit this car. You're free. They hit this armored car, take a whole load of money and take off. It's like Point Break or like.
It's a great movie, by the way.
I haven't seen the second one.
There's no need to see that.
Why would you?
One of the things that has bothered me about that case, and I think I know his role was not the shooter. Somebody got shot in that, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's not like they just robbed an armored car. Somebody actually got shot. He got 4 years in federal prison. And I'm not saying that's nothing, but my clients that shoot people in armed robberies, they're not getting 4 years.
No.
And he was directly involved. He was charged with a federal crime because it was an armored truck. But I mean, these are 5 to 99 or life over in the state courthouse.
Well, and frankly, in some of the other robbery cases that we've seen over in the federal courts that they're using against non-officers, they're using these stacking charges of using a weapon in conjunction with committing a crime of violence, and so they get them under these charges where it stacks it because using a gun in connection with it. So the first one is 7 years, and what the feds are doing is they're charging people they're waiting, to get them for the conspiracy, and they'll stack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 robberies as part of the conspiracy, and they'll stack all those on top of one another. And they end up, you get a guy who's 21 years old, goes out to commit a robbery, doesn't shoot anybody, just points the gun at the store clerk or whatever to make off with the phones or whatever the loot may be, so to speak, and they end up with 120, 150 years in federal prison. They aren't coming out.
And they're
They
not
aren't
in a
coming out.
position of authority. They're not in a position of
Exactly.
trust. And I think that's what the biggest problem with an officer like this is they're in a position of trust and they're held to a higher standard. At least they should be held to a higher standard. And I think that's the frustration with the system for a large number of people that are in the system.
Yeah.
You know, if he's in a lower socioeconomic group, if he's not in a power position, he's going to prison for many, 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 many years.
Well,
and it's frustrating for those people. And I understand the frustration. I understand why there are groups of people in America that are like, wait a minute, why is the system so, to put it in
Rigged.
political terms, rigged right now?
Well, look at the swimmer at Stanford. He
Yeah.
got 6 months in jail for rape. And I think I saw a comparison. There was a guy just recently, a black man who was just a young black man who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for essentially the exact same thing.
Well, and then you got his dad coming out saying for 20 minutes of pleasure or something.
Yeah, and pay our legal bills. I mean, you're going to see a lot of people, guys, are going to say, okay, you're 5 defense lawyers on here. Why are you beating up on a cop who's charged with a crime? Shouldn't you be out there to defend everybody? I mean, yeah, we are. And frankly, I don't know who represented Quesada, but they did a great job, frankly, getting him 4 years.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
They earned
Makes you
their-
think they're on the payroll. I don't know.
Exactly.
I mean,
Wait a second.
I mean, that's a great result.
They never
from
found the $4 million. Let's just keep in mind, they never found the
But-
$4 million.
Jimmy, everybody's issue is not with how the officer's treated, it's how poorly everyone else is treated.
That's-
Because
yeah.
let's just say Quesada is in the state system. In the state system, he's charged with that aggravated robbery. The standard record across the board for most aggravated robberies, at least where there isn't anyone shot, is about 15 years.
But you think even with a police officer?
If it's a police officer, I think it goes up because one, it's not going to
Really?
be handled by the line prosecutors. That's going to be handled by public integrity or police
Actually,
integrity.
No, it's gonna be no build.
Actually, no. Let's no.
It's not gonna
Exactly.
be
It's
no
gonna be
bill.
no bill.
That's possible.
No,
He's
no.
just gonna get no
Let's be
bill.
honest. They're not even charging with the aggravated robbery. They're going to charge him under the what do they always charge them? That it's a
Official oppression.
Official oppression.
official repression. If you've noticed at the Harris County District Attorney's Office, where they don't usually charge the officer with the offense that they actually committed. They could charge them with that and the official oppression. They only charge them with the official oppression.
Did the officer, and I forget his name, it's escaping my mind. The guy who was, he wasn't assaulting women, but he was clearly sexually harassing them.
No, he was assaulting women.
I think he was raping him.
Yeah, he
No,
was.
no. There was
that
one
one?
who was, there was
a different one.
There was a different one. This one was, he was just,
Oh, the tickets. He was doing something about tickets.
it was, I
like-
think he was a task force officer. And he wasn't,
Yes.
he wasn't sexually assaulting them, but he was clearly maybe groping and putting women in a very uncomfortable position.
Talking about Officer Green?
Maybe.
He's taking their photographs or taking their phones?
Don't
or
remember.
something?
But I mean,
They
he
do.
was never charged.
He's working for Precinct 1 if it's Officer Green. He just moved over to another agency.
Yeah.
What happened with Officer Green?
Oh, he took a woman's phone that had some
I think I heard
pictures
about
on
that, yeah.
it and showed all his buddies and started sending them around. Man,
I
he's still
think,
around.
I think the issue is that it's that the police officers were pretty much always getting the benefit of the doubt, right? It's the 911 calls that disappear. Well, whatever. It's the videos that disappear. It doesn't really matter. You know.
They get every benefit of the doubt at every step of the way because whenever they get arrested, you'll have a sergeant that'll come by. Nobody ever says this, but they'll tell them, "Don't say anything until your union rep gets here." If they have it to give a statement for purposes of employment, they know that statement can't then be used later on for prosecution.
Yeah.
Because it's over his Fifth Amendment objection.
Didn't
and I
I
think
say
it's-
something recently about a 48-hour rule? And they want there's a 48-hour rule with questioning cops that
Yeah.
on a shooting, that if you have an officer involved shooting, that the officer there's a 48-hour cooling off period before the officer.
Because you could say something that's harmful,
Yeah.
like you need a cool down.
and everybody
No.
knows.
The rest of the citizens in Atlanta don't get that 48 cool.
No.
Hey, let me
They don't
let me
get a-
really figure out what
they
my
don't get a
story is.
48
Get it
second
together.
reprieve.
Lord forbid he actually tells the truth and says, "Well, I got scared, I freaked out, and I shot the guy for no reason."
Right. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't it be a different world if all of our clients got that cooling off period?
Oh,
and,
it'd be
you
a
know,
completely
Or
different.
hey,
And
you
a
might want to
lawyer,
consult
like,
with the
at
lawyer
the scene.
before.
Yeah, you
Not
know,
just, hey, you have a right, but hey, let me get you a lawyer. In fact, we
Yeah.
won't talk to you until you talk to a lawyer. In fact,
Yeah.
you need to talk to your lawyer first. No, our clients don't get the benefit of the doubt on that.
Ever.
It's because they will say something stupid, and you don't want that stupid statement coming back to haunt the officer. One stupid statement that they will make that won't ever make it to any records is that, I was more concerned about going home than anything else. That's my number one priority. A lot of officers will say that off the record, but on the record, after the lawyers talk to them, they will not make that statement. I've heard it plenty of times at intake.
Gee.
Their number one priority is going home.
Okay, so 4 years federal aggravated robbery, but God forbid someone gets caught with some marijuana or a couple pounds of marijuana. I mean, the federal sentencing guidelines on that is just so bonkers to me that, you can help be a part of a heist, but God forbid you have some marijuana and you're selling some marijuana because you're going to get a whole lot more time for that.
Right.
It makes no sense to me.
I had a client that some masked gunmen followed his wife into the house in the morning, like 8:30 in the morning, and the one masked gunman shot at him, and he shot at one of them and hit him in the shoulder, and so they all ran off. But they ended up charging him with felon in possession of a firearm in federal court because it had been 12 years since his felony, right? So he's doing 3 years
Yeah, we've all had those.
in federal prison, even though they went to the hospital, policemen, and found the guy and brought him back to the scene, and there's pictures, he's like, the gunshot wound and blood and whatever. Like, so there's no question that these guys like broke into their house and had guns and whatever. But, my client had a gun, and so 3 years fed
Wow.
time. And it had been 12 years since his felony, which was a drug case.
Well, and here's the question.
Which
so,
is crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see in Quesada's case, because if he's doing it with his duty piece on him, I mean, he's got a weapon involved in the offense.
Let's wrap it all
Look.
back. So while he's doing this, he's arresting people for DWIs.
I'd like to know whether he got the weapons enhancement on the sentencing
They did do a
guidelines.
downward departure, I did read, so
Yeah.
I'm guessing they didn't get it.
Have we gotten the Brady notice yet on him?
He's been gone for a while. I don't know.
Yeah.
I never got one, actually, to be honest.
I had a number of them, and I had to take those cases all the way to the day of trial for them to be dismissed.
Oh,
I
yeah.
had like 3 or 4 of them, man, and I'm like,
It's kind of like the truce cases that are going on right now.
Right.
They know, we don't know what's going to happen with it. They know damn well what's going to happen to him. He's going to be fired. He's never coming back. And they got to get rid of the case. But like you say, you got to set the case for trial and push and push and push. Our clients have to continue to come to court, even though we all know the case is going to be dismissed eventually. And they're wasting their time. They're wasting our time. They're wasting their own resources. It's an inconvenience for our clients at best. What they don't understand is when you're charged with a crime, there's a lot of downside to that. You've got to come to court, bonds can get revoked, you can go to jail, you can lose your job. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on when you're charged, just for being charged with a crime.
Beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride.
So,
Speaking of prosecutors, let's talk about the Miami
Well,
case.
you want to talk about that next?
Well, we can talk about whatever.
well, I want to know.
You didn't read the memo?
Bienvenidos a Miami. Is over.
Let me remind our viewers, we're about halfway through the program right now, so if you want to call in, our number is 713-807-1794. You want to jump in on the conversation, just hit us up. Also, look us up on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. Got that blowing and going tonight. All right, you want to talk about the Miami federal prosecutors?
Well, because I had no idea until
I enlightened you.
you did. I learned something new today.
So the story goes like this. I don't know how many of y'all have ever had a case where you had to go to an outside copying service to get the discovery printed. A lot of days now, you obviously just get a disc and move on down the road. But in a lot of jurisdictions with federal cases, the U.S. Attorney's Office has an exclusive provider who will copy all the discovery where you can go pick it up. And they do this for a variety of reasons. One, obviously it's a government contract, so they're trying to get the best rate possible for, production. Two, they obviously are dealing in a lot of cases with potentially classified or confidential documents, especially with undercover CIs and everything like that, undercover agents, confidential informants. So they need to have a system they can trust. But the third reason, apparently, is according to the Miami Herald, so they can spy on defense lawyers.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I often this issue came up. I had a defendant in the Stanford litigation, and we were working on that, and all that discovery was electronic, and the government had provided. I don't know if y'all are familiar with some of these databases that you can search through. So you can do word searches of what you're looking for. You know, if you want to find an email from a certain person, you just type in certain keywords. So the government had built this database with a third-party vendor to upload all the documents in a searchable OCR format. And they said the defense can have access to it. And we're like, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want you looking at all our keyword searches and figuring out what exactly we were looking at and what documents we thought were important to the case, or what themes or what people we thought were important. So we said, no, we don't want that. We want the raw data, and we want to upload it onto our own system that y'all do not have access to. Well, what was happening in Miami was they had an exclusive copier, and the copy people, what you do is you go in, you flag the stuff. Remember the old days where you had to go in at the DA's office, especially? Remember you had to handwrite the offense report, and you couldn't copy it word for word.
Copious notes.
Yeah, and somebody was always sitting there over your shoulder, like looking at what you copied. So it's a lot like this. So that you go in, you flag what you want out of the U.S. Attorney's file, and the copy service would say, oh, they flagged this, they flagged this, they flagged that, and they'd report it back to the U.S. Attorney's office.
Give them a copy of what you got, in fact, is what I read.
Yeah.
Give them the exact copy of what you took out.
Of what you took out. Verbatim. It's pretty disturbing, actually.
What's disturbing is that this has been going on for, I guess the allegation is 10 years.
And did you see the government's response?
We didn't have anything to do with it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can ask for it.
And they should have known. They should have known we were doing it. They never called us on it before. They should have known.
But I love the defense of like, well, we didn't ask them for it. We didn't ask the copy, service for the disc. They just gave it to us. So
It's strange because the story says it went to an agent.
Yeah.
And I guess this agent is then turning it over to the prosecution. Who polices the police whenever you have an FBI agent that says, hey, let us know what they're looking at because we need to maybe fix our case, or to try and build our prosecution around what we expect their defense to be?
Right. I mean, it's just shocking that it's shocking, one, that they wouldn't, at least the defense lawyers, it did take them so long, in my opinion, to kind of catch on and think like, maybe we should check that out, because it's not like you're just copying a disc and sending it over. I mean, you're going through, you're flagging stuff, and this is the government's hand-picked copy production place. I mean, that would have drawn the little suspicion for me right from the get-go.
It's kind of like when you're approaching the bench pre-trial and you're asking for something, and the district attorney is up there and they're saying, "Well, I don't know what they need that for, Judge. I don't know why they need that. I mean, if they could just tell us why they need that, this problem wouldn't be this wouldn't be an issue."
Oh, I love that. Well, what are you going to use that for? Well, let me hand you my bar card before I explain to you my client's defense.
Yeah. It's the same thing. And I haven't handled many federal cases, but the ones I have out in Beaumont, we go and pick the disc up, and then out in Victoria and Corpus or Victoria, I'm sitting there in this little, and you still have to handwrite everything over there. At least the last couple cases I have. I don't know how, in a federal case, it's like you have boxes, like, you're out there handwriting things, and I mean, it's just. And the idea that they'd be spying on what you're doing too is just adds injury to insult.
It really does. It really does.
Well, it's really just tantamount to looking into your work product is what it amounts to.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing in our profession that's sacred. There's a few things in every profession that's sacred. It's kind of like when we went to law school. You cannot plagiarize. Give credit where it's due, but you can't plagiarize and call it your own. Same thing with this. That's one thing they don't have access to. They don't have access to our mental impressions and what we're doing with our cases. It's just like we don't have the access to theirs.
Well, and it's like with the jail calls. I mean, you're a fool, I think, if you have any kind of attorney-client privilege communications over the jail phones.
Right.
You know, I mean, you should, if by now you don't know better as a lawyer to tell your client, do not call me and do not have conversations, I will come to you. I mean, and even
may
with
be
this
next
video
week.
stuff, yeah. But like, so with the Bureau of Prisons, with the federal system now, they have email that you can send. Okay, and it's obviously it's very convenient, and I did it for a while with clients, and I told them, do not discuss the case. If you want to communicate with me about just ministerial matters, you can do it. But inevitably, they would start sending emails, you know, just outlining a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm like, I'm done. We're no longer. Do not. I canceled the account. I said I'm not taking any emails anymore, just for this very reason. I don't want, you know damn well all those emails are turned over to the prosecutors. They're reviewed by the agents. In a lot of cases, those emails are even sent to judges to review prior to a sentencing.
It's appalling, actually. I mean, and what gets me is you may have a client that's in jail for a year, right? And 2 weeks before trial, prosecutor's like, here you go.
Yeah.
The 8,000 phone calls and jail letters from your client. And it blows my mind.
We got a phone call dropping in here. Let's go to the lines, see who's on. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt.
I just want to make a comment that the purpose of government is to exist, and they will do whatever they have to, even kill their own constituents to exist. Look at Syria or Egypt. They have done that, and our government's no different and capable of doing that. You look at what the Khmer Rouge did to their people. They beat them until they admitted that they're agents of the CIA, and after they did and they signed their name, they killed them. And that's what's happening in our country right now. The NSA is listening in on all the conversations. I love to call up people and say, hey, you know my friend Al-Qaeda? Okay, now all these people are now your emails and all your phone numbers and everything's on a supercomputer, and you're being witnessed right now. You're being watched and forever for this stuff.
Thanks,
I just want
Obama.
to make that comment. It's very dangerous in this country right now, and really somehow we got to stop it.
Well, thanks for the phone call. We appreciate it. You know, I saw something. Speaking of NSA and downloading all the other stuff, I saw that Google, if you don't go turn off your settings, if you're logged in to your Gmail account, that is actually recording your voice through your computer or through your phone, and it's swear to God.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
It is scary, and you can go into a certain section and you have to delete, and it'll record all your audio.
No, and it's archived?
It's archived.
No, you know what? I actually had a friend that something popped up on her phone, but it was something very closely related to what she had just been talking about.
Right.
And she was very freaked out about it, and we were kind of like, what? But she said, no. I mean, it was something very unusual.
Well, it's
We
like
heard it just before we came on. My phone Siri started talking to me on my phone. You said something, and Siri started talking to me on my phone.
It's like when you're sitting at the airport and you're scrolling through your Facebook feed and you're like, wait a second, why is that dude that's sitting across from me popping up on people you might know? It's kind of creepy. So it's really, really strange. By the way, Tyler Flood, HTCLA's president, he is blowing up our Twitter tonight. Got some good stuff. He complimented my hair, by the way.
Oh, well.
He said I'm having a very good
Where's
hair
my
day,
love,
but,
man? Where's my love?
You didn't get a shout out. He also expects us to do a Miranda reenactment, so get ready, guys. I don't know if we can position the cameras to do a Miranda reenactment.
I don't want to be here, Ernesto.
Right.
Okay, I won't be here next.
Can I be the cop? I'll be the cop.
You know, Alsdonovic, speaking of this absurd government intrusion into our lives, I was in Victoria on a federal case, and I have to make the trip down there, and it's scheduled, and for whatever reason the booths were taken. They said, well, just use this one, and when you pick the phone up, just say, hey, this is attorney-client, and we won't listen to anything. Literally.
Trust
us for the government.
Me.
We're here to go help you.
No, not going to do that.
All right, I want to switch gears a little bit because we have Jamal and Jen here tonight, and I want to talk about the South Lawn, South Lawn gang injunction case being dropped. This is it's a big deal that you all have been working on for a while, and I was kind of hard on Monique Sparks when she came here about the whole thing. So But great work, guys. You guys
Thank
did a
you.
great job getting this dropped. For everybody who doesn't know, please fill us in on the details.
Start from the beginning, man.
Yeah.
Let's see, like,
Well, how far back do you want to go? Because this started a few years ago with the government trying to reduce crime in an area by using Chapter 125 of the Civil Practice and Remedies Code. There is a provision in there that allows them to seek an injunction to prevent future gang activity if someone is considered a public nuisance. And you're a public nuisance if you're a member of a criminal street gang. So what the police went and did is they went and looked at the people that have been arrested in that area, and they referenced that with their gang database, and they came up with a list of names. They brought those names to the county attorney's office, and after a few hours of conversation, maybe less, they drew an area where they believed these people could not go. They came up with a list of names, and they filed suit in the civil district court to try and kick these guys out of their homes.
The lawsuit was initially against 92 individuals that the state was alleging, and it was brought by the Harris County Attorney's Office and the District Attorney's Office. They were both plaintiffs, and they alleged the individuals were members of Bloods and Crips. And the way we got involved with this is that Monique Sparks, as you mentioned, she and I officed together. She was in criminal court, and one of her clients got served with a petition. And when she actually read the petition and saw what they were trying to do, and that is to literally permanently ban these individuals from a 2.02 square mile area. It's basically Old Spanish Trail to Cullen to 288, or 610 to 288, that whole area. And most of these individuals grew up there, they live there currently, they have children there, family members, you know, and kind of one of the things that we always say is like even sex offenders get to go, you know, home and can walk down the street.
So long as they're not next to a school.
True. But this was literally like would permanently ban them. And so what the police could do then is if someone was walking down Scott Street, the police could arrest them for literally just walking down the street and file a Class A misdemeanor against them and whatever. So this is, everyone had heard of Haverstock. So Haverstock
Right.
was the first one. And then there was one, they called it Braze Oaks, and then they expanded the area of Haverstock in 2014, and so this was the fourth one. But every single time, it's only against black men, and they always allege that they're Bloods and Crips.
now, do they have to? Were there ways that they could add individuals to the injunction, as the named individuals who were banned, or was it a set 90 some odd individuals, and would they only stop those individuals, or would it be like, I need reasonable suspicion to believe that you're that guy on the list, or how did that?
Well, that's what we actually, one of our concerns is that basically it would just give the police more reason to have contact with these individuals. And once we got in the case, it was, you know, myself, Jamal, and 4 other attorneys, and we were initially representing 56 guys, and it was all pro bono. But once we got into it, we started realizing how much contact the police were already having with these individuals. I mean, it was a lot of contact. And so basically, it would just give the police the ability to like stop a car and say, well, I think, you know, Bob Smith, you know, is in that car. I think I saw him in that car, so I'm going to stop the car. So it just, you know, one of our concerns was going to increase police contact with individuals. But
One of the things that I was unaware of is the area that it covered. I thought Haverstock was like an apartment complex, I think.
Well,
wasn't it?
you know-
Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
Well,
that was the
everyone's-
perception that I had, was that it was in a government project. But you're saying in this case it was a 2 square miles.
Yes.
It, you know, businesses, homes, residences,
Schools, public parks.
everything. Okay.
It covered several neighborhoods.
Okay.
Yellowstone neighborhood, South Union neighborhood, South Lawn neighborhood, all under this one big umbrella.
There were at least 30 churches in this area. There was 2 public schools, daycares, a public park, hundreds of businesses. I mean, the probation department, the South Region Probation Department was part of it. And the county attorney's office in a hearing said, yes, Your Honor, one of the defendants
was on probation.
was on probation and went to that office. And she said, yes, Your Honor, we're going to try to enjoin him from going to his probation department. And it's like, what are you thinking?
And then they filed the MAJ or MRP, and
Well, I mean,
I'd love to see that. Like,
It was just, it was really, really incredible. And we've been involved since mid-October. And ultimately, many people in the community got involved. A lot of community groups a lot of politicians got involved and helped bring attention to this. And it's interesting you bring up Haverstock. Everyone's under the impression that Haverstock was just the apartment complex.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It wasn't as large as this area, but it was actually had public streets and schools and things around it. Everyone just assumed that it was just the apartment complex, but that's not the case.
Well, to me, it adds a lot of perspective to it. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, the government controls this building. You can't come in this building unless you're a resident of this building. I kind of understand that. But when you talk about a full, 2 blocks, you're talking 30 churches and schools and probation officers. Yeah, you can't do that. Come on, government. We know better than that, right?
I'm curious. I mean, you guys, they dropped the case this week. Obviously, they abandoned it, say we're not going to pursue this anymore. Is your impression that it was dropped because of some sort of pressure, political or otherwise, social pressure? Or were you getting to the point where you were possibly going to get an adverse ruling against them on this?
I believe both.
Okay.
And the pressure from the community helped because both Vince Ryan and Devin Anderson up for election in November.
Yeah.
And the community came out and their voice was heard. I mean, some of their complaints reached some federal officials. It reached a lot of the county officials. And when people started asking questions, that's when things started to change because initially they did a cut from 92 down to about 46. Because they had to go back and say, okay, should all of these guys really be in there? Because initially they included guys that hadn't been arrested for some up to 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Or people that were already in prison, like serving their time and weren't going to be out for a long time.
For a long time, yeah. And I don't think they may have gotten them served, but these guys weren't going to be able to even come to court and defend themselves.
Well, and that was
Because you can't bench warrant them, right?
Well,
Or can
so
you?
that was actually one of the problems. Judge Gilmore actually, in an order, because we tried to take it up to federal court, and one of the allegations is that one of the defendants, that his due process rights were violated because he was served a show cause order, but he was in the Harris County Jail and there was no bench warrant. And so Judge Gilmore, in her order, she sent it back down, but she said, yes, this is a due process violation. He needs to be bench warranted in. And weirdly, when they never bench warranted, and they got default judgments against people in prison that they never bench warranted in, that we didn't represent. So.
And the bigger problem is, had they moved forward, for those guys that got the default judgments, we believe that there was a federal issue because you have banned someone from an area based on the judge not bringing them to court. You order them there, you don't bring them in, and now you have completely encumbered their rights. They can't go home, and it was a permanent injunction. The change that they made later on was that, well, no, it's just going to be from 2 to 4 years. But for those default judgments, it was permanent.
Wow.
So.
Well, let me ask you, where do they go from here? I mean, what's the resolution? I know they abandoned the lawsuit. Has there been any compromise? Has there been any efforts to move forward beyond this?
Well, one of the things that's been happening, and this is really a positive thing, is that they created a working group, and it was people from the defense, from the plaintiffs, from like the city of Houston and Gene Locke's office and different whatever, because they're actually trying to find a way to funnel some money into the community and find some alternatives, do some job programs and some educate, because that's what people really need. You don't need another reason to arrest individuals. One of our issues has always been, if someone's committing a crime, arrest them and prosecute them. If someone is on property that they are not supposed to be, then guess what? Arrest them and prosecute them.
Yeah.
You don't need this extra measure, but what the community does need is resources, and they need job programs and education programs and those type of things. So that's what they're trying to do.
So let me get this straight. This is too wild. They abandoned putting these people and labeling them as criminals and putting them in jail and or prison, and they decide to come up with the idea that the community needs resources to help them.
Yes.
That's absurd. I don't believe it. I don't buy it.
Hey, it's an election year.
I don't buy it.
Great
That didn't
things
happen.
happen in an election year, but
People get sparked to do things.
in all seriousness,
new
though,
things.
like we're really, really happy. We were supposed to start trial next week, So that was a huge,
How long did you anticipate the trial going?
they like 3 to 4 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your practices would have shut down and you were doing it all pro bono.
Yeah.
Well, consider that you had 5 lawyers who were going to be at the table getting to cross-examine officers coming up talking about these gang activities. We expected it to be somewhat of a free-for-all.
So,
Believe it.
well, I mean, and they had listed 30 cops as witnesses, you know, and all kinds
Who
of
was
things.
who was pressing it at that point? Who would be trying it? Was it going to be the county attorney or the district attorney?
Both. It was Caroline Dozier from the district attorney's office and Lisa Collins, and then from the county attorney's office, Selena Vinson, and there was a multitude of people.
Yeah.
Is this the first one? I mean, I know there's been similar injunctions across the country, but is this the first one that we've seen or know of that's straight up victory? I mean, there's just no doubt about it. KO in the 11th round, you guys knocked him out. Is there anything similar, or have we heard of any other victories?
I haven't heard of anything similar. This is the first one that's been fought in Harris County. When you go and you check to see if there's any case law under the statute, what you normally see are people trying to attack the court order in a criminal proceeding, collaterally.
When they get the criminal contempt charge, yeah. But I mean, because it's civil court, so people just aren't automatically entitled to lawyers, you know.
Yeah.
So it's most of the time there aren't lawyers to fight it.
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's a huge result, guys.
Great work.
Thank
Great work.
you.
Thank you.
Great work.
Great work. Yeah.
And, you know, kudos to you for,
It definitely-
for getting the job done, especially on a pro bono basis. Julio, you have been complimented.
Oh, well,
The
it's
Tyler has said no one has better hair than JV.
thank
The
you.
most coiffed man in the world.
Oh,
direct quote.
well, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Do you want me
Flood,
to print out
Mr.
the
President.
tweet so you can
Frame it?
frame it?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, you know, Tyler was the inspiration behind the glasses. So.
All right, guys. Last thing I want to cover tonight. Monday is the 50th anniversary of Miranda v. Arizona. Of course, that is the seminal case on reading a person their rights upon arrest. Everybody's seen it, of course, in movie and TV. That's where most people become familiar with it. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to attorney. We don't really see landmark cases too much anymore. Or we haven't really seen a whole lot in our lifetime. But this is a big one, and I wonder how much today does Miranda really still matter?
I think it matters a lot because a lot of people, they know they're in trouble whenever they hear those rights. Mm-hmm. So whenever someone hears you have the right to remain silent, most people think, okay, I'm really in trouble now.
Except then it makes them say, sure, I'll sign and waive those rights,
Right.
and I'll go ahead and talk. You know, it's
I think the most troubling case that I've seen on Miranda, and
Yeah.
this is just kind of a side note, was a recent case. I think it was out of Harris County. I think it was Neil Davis's case. I may be wrong. Where somebody remained silent
Yes.
for about 2 hours.
Exactly.
And they said that he had not invoked his rights. And I found that just
And that's why I asked the question, how
completely
much
disturbing.
does it really matter today? Because of that case, because of the fact that how many of y'all have gotten, the first thing a client comes into your office, they didn't read me my rights.
yeah.
Well, okay. How are we going to prove it? It's your word against theirs. And the
They
odds
lost the
are
video.
you're not going to testify in
Right.
this case.
They lost
and
the
odds
video.
are it doesn't matter because it's not a custodial interrogation oftentimes.
Exactly.
So I mean, there's a couple of qualifiers on that. That's
But even when it is in fact, we were just
Then
talking.
you have the whole credibility issue.
Well, we were
Who are
just
they gonna
talking
believe?
today about, I was reading a criminal complaint, and I said, I love it when it says, during the non-custodial interrogation. And I'm like, as soon as you say that, you know it was custodial, right?
Well, I think one thing it is, we're all talking legalese here. It is important for the audience to know that in order for Miranda to apply, you must be, number one, in custody, and there has to be questioning by the officers. That's the only time that Miranda applies. So stop calling my office telling me they didn't read your Miranda rights. If it's not that situation, they don't have to read your Miranda rights. I think it's a common misperception because
It is.
everybody sees it on television. Everybody thinks, hey, that didn't happen in my case. My case needs to go away. That's just not what happened.
But the best case scenario is they should just not talk.
Well-
if you know what I mean? When the police start asking you questions beyond your name and address, like, so, where are you going tonight? Well, then maybe you should just be quiet. Or now invoke
it's funny
your
you
right.
mention that because the Supreme Court recently has ruled that a person has to affirmatively invoke their rights, meaning they have to tell the police, I want to remain silent, instead of just being
Remaining
quiet.
silent.
Right, and that's where.
And it seems that you're taking a swipe at what we're so used to believing our rights to be under Miranda. Because if I want to remain silent, I'm not going to say anything. But now I have to tell you, I don't want to talk.
Well, it seems to me, and what's happened with Miranda is what's happened to a lot of landmark cases, the Fourth Amendment, is that today the appellate courts are finding ways to write around them.
there's so many exceptions.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we understand that's what the case said and that's what you're supposed to do, but and they figure out a new and creative way around it.
Well, that's why Sotomayor in the case you're talking about, which I can't pronounce
It's
the name.
Berkowitz.
Whatever, V. Tompkins. but she wrote the dissenting opinion in and was very long. But what she said is like, this turns Miranda on its head because
Yeah.
now you're requiring defendants to affirm it, to speak and say, I want to remain silent. And she's like, that's totally.
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It's counter what you're telling them. I mean, you're telling them you have the right to remain silent.
And
That's what I'm doing. I'm remaining silent. That's all I'm going to do.
They need to add a sentence. But if you want to remain silent, you must, verbally state you want to remain
And
silent.
there are two ways you can say you wish to remain silent. And both of those ways, in my opinion, are violating your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent because you have a voice templar. So, I mean, they can compare your voice with something that may have happened, or you have to write it down, where your handwriting may be compared to something.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
So
Very
that's
smart.
the problem you have when you have to say something. Or what, you type it into a computer, now they can go and look at the computer. There's no good way to do it.
I think though, but it's pretty easy to say like, I don't want to talk, and stop talking.
Well, but then you look guilty, so.
Well, people think you're guilty anyway, right?
They're not
So-
questioning because they think you're innocent.
Right.
That's true.
But you know what? That's,
In the words of my grandmother, if they were arrested, they must have done something
exactly.
wrong.
Right.
I mean,
Well, that's why I always tell my clients, I'm like, the police aren't there to really help you and get your side of the
No.
story. They are collecting evidence against you, and so they're like, oh, yeah, oh. That's
But
why
getting
you're,
back to your original question, I do still think Miranda has some value in our system.
is it just a good feel-good value, or is it
No,
real
I think it
tangible
actually
value?
does have value. I think that there's a handful of people, not a lot,
Correct.
that will actually take the advice and will ask for a lawyer or
That's
remain
true.
silent. I mean, I think that it does have value. They need to know that. I think the problem is it's kind of like a lot of things that are indoctrinated in us.
Yeah.
You hear it over and over and over and over and over again. You almost lose the words and what they actually mean. I think that's what's been eroded. But is there value? Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and I think for us, we're also probably a little cynical about it too, because again, it's like, stop calling me about this. If it didn't happen in your case, I mean, we're all kind of a little bit jaded by the whole thing,
Well,
because we know that's not happening.
You know what the district attorney's office does is Miranda only applies once you're arrested. But if you don't,
You're detained.
If you're detained and decide not to remain silent, then they charge you with failure to identify yourself.
Which is just the stupidest thing.
And I get the clients like, I was remaining silent, man. I was like, yeah, but you weren't arrested. Yes, I was. And then we have this kind of circle.
Well, we got 30 seconds left, guys.
But it is valuable, and you are right. Some clients do actually, take heed and listen to the advice or whatever. But I think we're also jaded too because we've all done the motion to suppress, like custodial interrogation, and it's just like obvious and overruled,
The only
even
one
hear
I've ever been successful is when the officer had a gun on the guy. And then the judge said, all right, you were ready to feel
That's
free
enough.
to leave.
This hour has flown by.
It has. It
It
really
was a
has.
great night though.
Really good show.
Good night.
Great time. Thank you so much for having us.
Good to have you guys on.
Thank
What's
you.
your next pro bono project?
Haverstock?
The people want to know.
Get that overturned. That's a good way to start off.
All right, we got to wrap things up for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But I want to thank Dane Johnson, Jamal Haynes, and Jen Gott for joining us tonight. Julio, we'll be back next week.
See you next week.
All right, man. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next Thursday night right here, 8 p.m. Central Time.